Now let's talk about rhythm. So rhythm is a super important aspect of online writing. It does not get talked about enough. And how readers read on the internet is they read quickly, they skim, right? They want to get a sense of what's going on before they really take the time to sit there and dig into a piece. I mean, just notice next time you're scrolling through your whatever your favorite social platform is, when you click on an article, notice how you read it. All right. You'll see that you skim, and then when something catches your eye and you go, oh, this is interesting to me, then you dig into it. Okay. So what rhythm does when you intentionally play with rhythm in a piece is I like to think of it as you're rewarding the reader as you go. All right. There's a big difference between clicking on an article that has these big blocky paragraphs, right? You're asking the reader, you're going, hey, this is not going to be that easy. So I'm asking that you step up to the plate here. Now, if you're writing, fine literature, all right, and you're competing for the Pulitzer Prize and you want to do whatever it is that you want to do, you're part of the fancy New York elite, all right, do your thing. I just want to share with you that is not how readers read on the internet, all right? And if you click on something with these big blocky paragraphs, the reader is going to go, I am not in the mood for this right now, all right? So what I ended up learning as I've written thousands of articles on the internet is that there's some really effective techniques that you can use to get the reader to not just fall into your writing, but to keep falling into your writing over and over and over again. All right. So this is probably my favorite compliment I've ever gotten on my writing is I've had people say, once I start reading your articles, I can't stop. And that is by design. Every single piece of the article, of the essay, is there intentionally to keep pulling you forward. I'm trying to pull the reader down into the next section, down into the next section. And the thing is, it's not that hard to do. I mean, it's once you see how it works, anyone can do it. So what I ended up creating for myself is kind of this rhythm writing technique. And this rhythm writing technique is breaking sentences and thoughts into repeatable patterns. And these repeatable patterns are, kind of the building block that I found for myself is this idea of one sentence being your opener, three sentences being, it's the reason why you're there. It's the short story. It's the clear insight. It's the explanation. And then the final sentence being this takeaway, this pivot, this, whatever it is. And there's something about this alternation between one sentence, three sentences, one sentence. It's short and then long and then short. And it's this wavering between, you're alternating that really helps the reader then feel like the piece is moving forward. Rhythmically, as you read it, you can hear it in your head and it feels like the piece is moving forward. So you can hear it even as I read this, right? Okay, so this is an excerpt from one of my own atomic essays. My first year of high school sucked. Right? You can't read that sentence and not want to know what happens next, right? And that's the point. And there's something about it being short. There's something about it being very concrete. It's clear, right? I'm not muddying the waters. I'm not asking the reader to dive into this whole big paragraph. My first year of high school sucked. Well, by the time you've read that line, your eye is already going into the next paragraph. And that is by design. You're falling into the piece, okay? So then the next paragraph, I didn't have a group of friends. I sat by myself every day at the one lunch table nobody else sat at. Saw a little error there, right? Ship quickly. And I didn't talk to anyone during or between classes, spending every Friday alone in my bedroom, eating takeout Chinese food and playing World of Warcraft. My first year playing hockey as a kid also sucked. Okay? So all of a sudden you can hear there's this whole short story that's packed into this middle paragraph. And then this final sentence kind of rounds it out. It makes the reader feel like, oh, I've finished this short story. Now I'm at this checkpoint. But now this sentence is mirroring the first one. So then the reader goes, wow, then what was the first year like, right? Now you're falling into the piece again. And then you repeat it. You're falling into the piece again. And so you could literally use this 1-3-1 technique all the way down the page. And I'll show you in a second an example. And the reader wouldn't even know what was happening. the reader would just feel like, wow, this piece has so much movement to it. It's like this clear opener. I go into a story or I go into an insight, and then it's got a little conclusion. And then it's got a clear opener, and I go into a story, I go into an insight, and it's got a clear conclusion. And there's something about that that just really works. I use 1-3-1s all the time. Now, here's the thing. If you're going to expand this, all right, so how do you do that? If you want to add a little bit more, all right, this is where then the rhythm writing techniques start to, there's a lot of variations. 1-3-1, I think, it's the foundational building block, but you can expand it here. So now we're going to turn it into 1-4-1. Okay, so this is an excerpt from my weekly Category Pirates newsletter, and this is, it's a lot more heady content. It's very business-minded content. Here we're telling the story of the Campbell's Soup Company. So look at how it's the same exact format, the same rhythm writing approach, just applied to different content. Okay, so clear opener. 100 years ago, the Campbell's Soup Company had a breakthrough. Well, the reader, you got to find out what the breakthrough is, right? You're falling into the piece. Okay, so now the reader goes, I'm into the little short story. I'm into the piece here. For 30 years, the business sold little else besides produce, canned tomatoes, vegetables, jellies, condiments, minced meats, and of course, soups. One sentence. Business was good, but there was nothing radically different about these products. Second sentence. Canning had been widely accepted as a method for sealing food since the early 1800s, and even when pasteurization was invented in 1864, fresh foods were difficult products to scale. Third sentence. Soup, for example, while cheap to make, its primary ingredient being water, was still heavy and expensive to ship. 4 cents. Okay, so we've just crammed the entire history, basically, of the Campbell's Soup Company into 4 sentences. Right? Compress. Then we've got our final closing sentence. Until in 1895, a chemist within the company named John T. Durrance came up with a radically different idea. Rounds out the short story, and at the same time, that if you get to here, then the reader goes, well, what was the radically different idea? Falls into the next section, okay? So when you pair this rhythm writing approach with these little hooks in the content, what's going to happen? All of a sudden, the reader starts flying. They're flying through your piece. They're skimming it and they're reading every sentence at the same time, and they're trying to keep up, and they're there for a reason. They're enjoying it. They're engaged. They want to be there. Okay? So now let's say you want just a little bit more explanation. All right. So now what do? You want to expand it even more. We go to 1-5-1. All right. Same exact thing. All we're doing is just expanding that middle. All right. So again, if we're thinking about it this like a sandwich, right? You got your first sentence, piece of bread, piece of gluten-free bread. You got your middle, which is your meat, your vegan patty, whatever it is. And then your closing sentence, you've got another piece of gluten-free bread. Okay. If you're going to expand any part of the sandwich, right, how would you feel if you went to a deli and you said, I want more on this sandwich, and they gave you a second piece of bread? You don't want a second piece of bread. You want 3 more slices of salami, right? You want more of the meat. You want more in the middle. You want more of the content. So if you're using this approach, right, if you're using this rhythm writing approach, I am such a firm believer in using these bookends, all right? 1 clear opener, 1 clear closer. And if you're going to add anything in the middle, you need it to happen there, all right? If you want to add more insight, more to the story, more content, you want to put it there. Now, of course, you can use tons of different variations. You could do 1, 2, 5, 2, 1. You could do 1, 2, 3, 5, 3, 2, 1. But what matters is you're creating this wave. And so I really like thinking about it where on both ends, you're starting with less and you're working up to something big in the middle. Okay. And you notice this is the reason why this is effective is when isn't writing effective? Writing isn't effective when every paragraph is the same size, right? If every paragraph was 2 sentences, you would read it and kind of go, it's kind of like monotonous. It's not really going anywhere. And so you want to start with minimal, build up to, hey, there's a 5-sentence paragraph in the middle. That's a whole story. Okay. And then you want to kind of decrescendo. All right. If you're a musician, you get that term, right? You want to crescendo and then decrescendo down, and then you want to repeat it. You want to do that over and over again. So here's what that looks like. This was a article that I wrote a long time ago at this point. Here's a great example of how you can pull 1-3-1 all the way down the page. Okay, so you can see it really clearly here, right? You've got 1, you've got 3, you've got 1, and then you just run it back. 1, 3, 1. And you could do this the whole way down, and the reader would just go, wow, this is so cleanly formatted. The rhythm's working. It feels like it's got momentum. So I really encourage you to play with this 1-3-1 approach. Play with it in openers, especially in terms of opening your atomic essay. It is such an effective way of getting the reader to fall into the piece. And even here, this is a pretty long first sentence. I really like working toward how do you get the first idea to the reader in the shortest amount of time possible. If you can make that first sentence crisp and really short, if it can fall on just one line, there's something that's just so appealing about that to readers. They're like, oh, I'm flying through this. This feels fun. So that's what you want to try and optimize for. But this is, when it comes to rhythm writing, having this sense of rhythm in mind is really crucial, because what it's going to do is it's going to make your piece sound like it was really intentionally crafted, right? And that's the goal. Obviously, we're all sitting here intentionally crafting our writing. But if it's not formatted well, and if there isn't a sense of rhythm, sometimes the reader reads a piece or reads an essay and goes, this, I get what you're saying, but I don't think that you really worked that hard on this, right? So all of a sudden, if you start putting some of these constraints in place, it really, it makes the presentation 10 times better. It makes the reader feel like they're really receiving an intentionally crafted piece, as opposed to just kind of like, I rapid fired a bunch of words. And that's really important, because remember, you are creating products for the reader. You are not just writing for the sake of writing.